Do you struggle to conceal your gun? You found the optimal position to carry and the best clothes to hide the gun, but your gun still prints. If so, the gun itself is a problem. My name is Jeff Mao. I am the founder and product designer at Tenacor. I have been carrying a gun for 25 plus years, and I have made all the mistakes you haven't even thought of. Our goal for this video is to share my experience with the best guns and accessories that are optimized for concealment. So I worked as a police officer for 14 years. Cops are notorious for thinking, hey, I got a badge, I don't have to worry about concealment. So they look like they have these big growths coming out of their waistband, and they really don't care about concealment. Achieving concealment is not hard. However, it requires commitment. Commitment to actually carrying a gun, and then commitment that drives certain equipment choices and system choices. If you expect to just go buy a gun, throw it in your pants, and go on with your day, you're gonna have problems. You're not gonna have comfort, you're not gonna have concealment. You need to have a principled approach to how you think about this whole problem. A handgun, by definition, is a compromise. So if you knew you had to get into a gunfight, the best thing to do is just not go there. If you had to go there for some reason, then you would actually want to carry a rifle. And so a handgun, by definition, is a defensive thing. It is not the optimal weapon for dealing with a lethal confrontation. You should carry the most shootable gun that you will consistently carry, which doesn't mean you're gonna carry some big honkin' gun for competition, and also doesn't mean you're gonna carry some tiny little 25 ACP pocket gun. For most people, it's gonna be probably somewhere in between. So let's talk about the features of the gun. The first thing we're gonna talk about is the grip. So the grip of the gun is the most difficult part of the gun to conceal because the slide is basically parallel to the body, the grip is perpendicular to the body, so it is the thing that sticks out and is the hardest to hide. The bigger the grip and the longer the grip, the more difficult it is. So something like the Glock 45 versus the 19, where they have matching slide lengths, but the Glock 45 has a longer grip, the Glock 45 is gonna be much more difficult to conceal. Let's talk about slide length and different slide lengths. And so from a comfort perspective, the longer the slide, the more likely it is to be uncomfortable. So something like a Glock 34 versus a Glock 19 versus a Glock 43, the 43 is likely to be the most comfortable. And from a concealment perspective, things are a little bit different. Generally, the length doesn't matter because the entire length of the gun is hidden underneath your pants. Additionally, some length can be helpful because it keeps the gun from tipping out. Your belt acts like a pivot point, and then you have mass above your belt that is pushing things out and away, and it can cause tip out. Having more length below the belt will help to keep the gun from tipping out. So if you have a short little gun like Glock 43 and you want to carry it because you feel like it's going to be more comfortable, the solution to this is making sure you have the correct holster that has correct ride height adjustment and then the right kind of body contour or wedge underneath to counterbalance any tip out issue. So for outside the waistband carry, slide length matters a lot. So something like the Glock 45 makes a ton of sense because it's got a shorter slide. And if you're outside the waistband, the longer slide is going to stick out below your cover garment. So that is a consideration. Something like a Glock 34 is not going to conceal very well in and outside the waistband holster. The thickness of the gun matters. The thickness of the gun, like its width, either on the slide or on the frame, is the thing that is basically, it's against your body and it's how much is pushing out away from the body, and that is what's gonna matter the most. However, most of the thickness issues are less about the gun and they're often more about the holster. That the holster and the clips and the attachments are all set up in the wrong spot, and those things are adding girth to it. If you can minimize extra girth from the accessory equipment part, like a holster, then you can get away with a thicker gun like this Glock 19 versus a Glock 43. But if you're looking for the most concealable setup, always the thinner gun will win. Sometimes people want to add grippy texture, either some sort of stick-on thing or they stipple the gun. The grippier it is, the grippier it is. And so it might work well for shooting, but it's also gonna grab onto your clothing. And so if you're trying to hide the gun, having some texture on there that's gonna grab onto your clothing and hold it in a spot is gonna print. So if you wanna add some sort of texture to the gun, then you want something that's basically not gonna grab onto the clothing. I have some guns that are stippled and they have more aggressive texturing, but it's kind of like this balance. The texturing is more aggressive, but it's not as sharp. So now we're going to talk about features and accessories on guns that protrude or stick out. The first one is going to be just the angles of the gun. So something like a revolver that has more curves on it looks more organic. And so you can put that in your waistband, and even though it might print a little bit, it's not going to be obvious that it's a gun. Whereas something like a semi-auto handgun that has more right angles and more straight lines on it, if it prints, it's going to be more clear that there is some sort of man-made object that is underneath your clothing. So an example of this is going to be in 1911. So instead of the end coming to a sharp point, this has a bobtail on it that is more rounded to make it look more organic and conceal better. Some sort of large flared magwell like this works really well for reloads, and in a competition setting or something else, it might be important. However, from a concealment perspective, this is terrible. One is, are you even carrying a reload, and are you gonna need to reload? And if so, how much performance gain are you gonna get from having this versus a stock or factory magwell? And then two, like I said, the grip is the hardest part to conceal. So basically here, I'm lengthening the grip and I'm making it bigger. And that's just gonna make it more difficult to conceal well. I have a magwell on this gun also. It's not as big and protruding, but it's still bigger than the stock frame by itself. And neither one of these really are appropriate for concealment. So extended mags are another accessory that compromises concealment. So if I stick that in there, I'm just making my grip longer. And do you really need an extra 4 rounds, 6 rounds, whatever in your carry gun? Is the 15 or 17 that it comes with not enough? So extended magazines are a terrible idea in the actual gun that you're trying to conceal. However, they can work well if you want to carry an extra magazine because it gives you something nice to grab onto. It also, particularly if you're going to carry appendix, can allow you to carry deeper in the waistband to have less tip out, and it's going to be more comfortable and more concealable. So optics are a pretty important part of your shooting system and something that I advocate as pretty much standard on a carry gun. If you think about the carry gun, basically there's going to be some pivot point for rotation, and that pivot point is going to be kind of around the barrel or maybe just below the barrel. And as I rotate the grip into my body, what is coming away from my body? Well, it's the optic is coming out away from the body. And so if you have a really large optic, like this Trijicon RMR HD is relatively large, and I have it in my waistband and I continue to rotate, I'm gonna get some printing here on the front. If you're gonna have a big optic like this, you're probably gonna print a little bit on the grip and a little bit on the optic, and you gotta find that right balance. In order to reduce that, something like the SRO is actually probably gonna print a little bit less because it's rounded here instead of this HD that has basically these ears on it. They're a little pointy. And then the next place to go is just to a lower profile optic. If you want to carry an optic that's going to be easier to conceal, you could go to something like this Holosun 507K or this Shield RMSC. These obviously are smaller, so they're going to be easier to conceal, but they are not as durable as the larger, more robust Trijicon optics. So if you're wondering what gun should I actually buy, the gun that I carry is going to be a Glock 19. So this is an older gun that I've had for a long time. It is a Gen 3 Glock 19. I've done some stuff to it, and the stuff that I've done to it basically is to make it like a Gen 5 Glock 19. So if I had to buy a new gun today, I'd buy a Gen 5 Glock 19 MOS. I'd put a relatively low profile optic on it, and then I would be done. I've spent a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of time trying to figure this out. This isn't new information or hard to get to information. This is tried and true information that is based on my experience and also thousands of other people who have had similar experiences who've landed in a very similar spot. Hiding your gun is a commitment. So are you committed to carrying a gun every day? And if so, are you actually committed to carrying it concealed? If you are, then you're gonna have to make lifestyle choices, you're gonna have to make equipment choices, specifically about the gun. Is the gun optimized for shooting, but is it also optimized for concealment? Gun choice is really important, however, it's not the first thing. The first thing is gonna be carry location. After that is gonna be your choice of gun and accessories, and then finally your clothing. That is the hierarchy of those things. However, those things can't be separated. They all work together as a system to allow you to carry a gun concealed and comfortable every day. If you want to learn more about carry location, check this out. If you want to learn more about clothing, check this out. And if you want to buy the best equipment in the world, check it out at Tenacor.com.
I'm good. Do you struggle to conceal your gun?
No.
Say the line.
Oh, okay. Do you struggle to conceal your gun?